Welcome to Algebra 1. Learning goal for this episode is to learn how to find the probability that an event will occur and to be able to express that as both a probability and in terms of odds. First, some necessary vocabulary. A possible result of an experiment is called an outcome. If you flip a coin, there are two possible outcomes, heads and tails. An event is an outcome or collection of outcomes. If you flip a coin and it comes up heads, that's called an event. The set of all possible outcomes is called a sample space. So, for example, if you flip two coins, then you have four possible events that make up the sample space. You could get heads and then heads, heads and then tails, tails and then heads, or tails and then tails. We often use a tree diagram to display the sample space. The probability of an event is a measure of the likelihood, or chance, that the event will occur. Probability is always a number from 0, no chance at all, to 1, definitely will happen, and can be expressed as a fraction, decimal, or a percent. When all outcomes for an event are equally likely, we can find the theoretical probability by using the following formula. Theoretical probability equals the number of favorable outcomes divided by the total number of outcomes. So if you flip two coins, the theoretical probability of getting two heads is 1/4, or 0.25, or 25%, however you want to write it. An experimental probability is based on repeated trials of an experiment. Its formula is number of successes divided by number of trials. So if you flip two coins 4 times and actually get heads and then heads, heads and then heads, heads and then tails, and tails and then heads, the experimental probability of getting two heads in this experiment would be 1/2. Odds are another way of stating probability. The odds of an event compare the number of favorable and unfavorable outcomes when all the outcomes are equally likely. The odds in favor of an event are the number of favorable outcomes divided by the number of unfavorable outcomes. And the odds against are the inverse, the number of unfavorable outcomes divided by the number of favorable ones. So the odds in favor of flipping two coins once and getting two heads are 1/3, or 1/3, because it's one favorable outcome to 3 unfavorable outcomes. And the odds against would be 3/1. Let's look at an example. Say you pick a letter at random from the alphabet. What is the probability you pick the letter A? The sample space is all the possible letters A through Z, so 26 total outcomes. There is only one favorable outcome, A. Therefore, the probability is going to be 1/26. Let's look at another example. Say you roll a 6-sided die numbered 1 through 6. What is the probability of rolling a multiple of 3? What are the odds in favor of that? Against that? In this case, the sample space is all possible integers 1 through 6, so 6 total outcomes. There are two favorable outcomes, 3 and 6. So the probability is 2/6, or we could reduce that to 1/3. The odds in favor would be 2 to 4, 2 favorable outcomes to 4 unfavorable, or we could reduce that down to 1 to 2. The odds against would then be 4 to 2, or 2 to 1. In this example, we have a spinner divided into 4 equal areas colored red, green, blue, and orange. What's the theoretical probability of spinning once and getting red? Our total outcomes are 4. Our favorable outcomes is just 1. So the probability of getting red is 1/4. Now say the spinner is actually spun 20 times and comes up red 3 times, green 7 times, blue 4 times, and orange 6 times. Now what's the experimental probability of each color? The probability of red would be 3/20. Probability of green is 7/20. Of blue is 4/20, or we could reduce that down to 1/5. And of orange is 6/20, or reduced down to 3/10. Now for our guided practice section. We're going to work through some problems together. You do not need to write down these problems, just step through them with me. At each step I'm going to prompt you the question you should be asking yourself, then I'll pause for about 5 seconds for you to think about it and answer it for yourself, then I'll show you. So our first question is, what are we trying to do here? What we're trying to do is calculate the probability and the odds of rolling an even number. How do we do that? We determine all of our possible outcomes, in this case 6 of them, then all of our favorable outcomes, in this case 3, since there are 3 even possibilities, and then state our probability, which in this case is going to be 3 over 6, or reduced down to 1/2. The odds in favor would be 3 to 3, or reduced down to 1 to 1, 3 favorable outcomes to 3 unfavorable ones. The odds against would be the same in this case. Let's try another one. What do we do first? First, we need to determine our sample space. We have 4 possible outcomes and 2 favorable ones. Therefore, our probability is 2/4 or 1/2. What's next? Next, we calculate our odds in favor, which would be 2 to 2 or 1 to 1, reduced down. The odds against would be the same in this case. Let's try this one. What do we do first? First, we determine the number of trials and the number of successes. Then we write our probability. In this case, it's going to be 5/12. Now for the self-check section. In this section, you're going to physically pause the video as you work out the problem on paper in your notebook. Then you'll press play to check to see how you did. You'll have 5 seconds to pause the video after I stop speaking before I show you the solution. Please pause the video now and work out the problem, then press play to check. Here is the solution. Please compare this to your work. Pause the video here if you need more time to compare, then press play again to move to the next problem. Same thing on this problem. Pause the video, write down this problem and work it out in your notebook, then press play to check. Please pause the video now. Here's the solution. Again, pause the video if you need more time to compare this to your work. In closing, let's review our learning goal. We wanted to learn how to find the probability that an event will occur and to be able to express that as both a probability and in terms of odds. We did that by learning the definitions of theoretical and experimental probability and the definitions of odds in favor and odds against.